our birthright really is, like, why we've come here in the first place really is to awaken to that place, which is the heart, which is the place where truth and love reside. And when we come from that place, with a place of, I think what happens in for many people anyway, the heart breaks along the way. And, the Leonard Cohen song, where the crack comes, the light comes in.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where we develop compassion. And when you meet somebody who has developed compassion, whatever they're doing, they will be bringing the very best through.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Welcome to today's episode. It's episode number 15. And we have Eileen Heneghan. I hope I pronounced correctly. I am so excited about this episode because Eileen is a very special person. I met Eileen, I think 2 years ago when I was after starting my business, and we met in a network.
Tipperary,
yeah, in South Tipperary Women in Business.
Yes.
And I want to make a confession. So the way how I felt about Eileen was that special touch of an angel. You don't need to have that physical touch necessarily, but you feel that energy touching you. And since then we didn't meet, but every time when we interacted and our energies communicated in any way, I felt that special touch. So I'm honored and extremely excited about this episode, and I am just allowing the flow of divine to guide us and to see where brings us. So thank you so much for being here. And
thank you so much, Smarta, for having me. Samaranda for having me. And thank you for that very generous and kind welcome. I really appreciate being here, and it's a great joy and honor for me to be part of this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you are such a special person. I don't know even where to start because it's such a abundance of gifts what you have. So I know you were a nurse.
Yes, I started my career, my pathway through nursing, general nursing, and that was in 1979 in St. Vincent's Hospital in Dublin. At that point, nursing was a training, so one went directly to a hospital, and I staffed for a year in a renal and metabolic unit, and then I went to the Coombe Hospital. Coombe, at that time, was called the Coombe Women's Lying-In Hospital, and I studied midwifery, and I stayed on there, and I really was very passionate about the labour ward experience, and I loved that. And then in 1990, I got married and came back to Tipperary. And
are you originally from
I'm
Tipperary?
Originally from Clonmel.
Oh, okay.
And at one point, I'd been in Dublin for longer than Tipperary, but now, of course, I've been back in Tipperary for quite some time. And I worked in South Tipperary General Hospital, which is now a university hospital, in the midwifery department, and then I became a CNM2, a management position in Gynae, which touched into the sadder side. Well, some of it obviously a lot of it very positive, but the sadder side of midwifery, where we looked after women who experienced miscarriage, stillbirth, fertility issues, and also then repairs, hysterectomies, etc. But always I work, obviously at the moment I work with every age and stage and have done for many years, but that part of women's health is very important for me and always has stayed with me, actually.
I'm going to share something with you. I didn't know that it's going to come up, but look, if it came up, I'm going to say it. I had a miscarriage myself before Lucas.
Okay.
And I found very hard to have no support from the medical
model.
Yes, exactly. And it was an advanced pregnancy. Twins, and it was very emotionally, like I wasn't prepared. I was 25, so very young, and I think it's so important, that role in the medical care.
Yes, absolutely.
system. What is probably now it's more, because I think the awareness, like with everything else, the awareness
has
is more
grown.
Yes, exactly.
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that you had the loss of 2 babies, a very big loss, and a first pregnancy, to lose what was expected to be a joyous event. And I think there's a great, to a degree, yes, things are much better now and there's greater awareness, but I think the sense of loss does not equate with the length of pregnancy. Now, you've mentioned yours was advanced, which is even harder to go through physically and emotionally, but it's the sense of what might have been. And often there's a lot of anticipation, or, to get pregnant can be a journey in itself, and then to lose. So it is very hard, but I think people are more equipped now, as in the profession is more aware and offers greater support. And then the external factors, like the Miscarriage Association of Ireland and bodies like that are really helpful. And, coming to, people might come for the benefits of acupuncture or healing.
The alternative therapies.
The alternative therapies, exactly. And then it's sort of time and space.
Like for me was a very obvious that I blamed myself, that my body wasn't, I blame my body, and I actually forgive myself for doing that, absolutely. But I wasn't aware. Yeah. And it was like, I'm not able. So my body is not able for, and carrying that guilt and
difficult.
Exactly. Without having the system or the framework to process that. I think that's such an important part.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. I also lost my first pregnancy through miscarriage. Yeah, so it's, and then I think sometimes through the life journey, I believe anyway that the spirit of that baby, or babies, as in your case, they're always with us. And so I would encourage people, to really recognize that there was the potential of a being who just needed to touch physicality for that short period of time. And the soul has evolved, to that point. And in the work, the way I look at things is,
I never heard that, but really resonates. So thank you.
So sometimes naming actually the babies.
We did.
That's lovely.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So was another Lucas and Adalia. So yes, nice. They always had the names.
Very nice. And sometimes people might like to plant a tree in memory, or a plant. I know in my case, it was a number of years later, but I planted a viburnum that flowers. It's an unusual tree. It flowers in November and again in the summer. But the loss was at that time of the year, and I actually managed to find the tree that was the same age as Elizabeth would have been. So it's interesting. And I get great joy from that tree still, Yeah.
Thank you so much for allowing the space to share that and give me the opportunity to share that.
You're very welcome. And the other point is that sometimes the one who doesn't come through fully is the one who's made the way for the next to come.
Okay.
There's a journey within that as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, what brought you from the Western medical system care to more holistic and from a place of heart of healing? Because I think you are very much on a healer path, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think I possibly was always heart-led. I just, I remember actually just at the beginning, I will answer your question, but just at the very beginning of our training, on the very first, I think it could have been on the second day, we had our hands blessed by we went to a ceremony by a priest, and I remember at the time looking at my hands and thinking, oh, what will they do? And that thought came back to me as I was driving here this morning. So maybe it needed to be shared. So I probably the miscarriage was the beginning, although it was much later. I then went on to have 2 living children, Philip and Zoe, who are now 30 and 27. And when Philip was born, I felt that I was going to, effortlessly produce the baby, effortlessly move through the first years. And it was quite the opposite. I had an emergency section. I had a lot of infection afterwards in varying places. And that basically When he was about 12 weeks, I started to develop a medical condition called erythema nodosum, which involved me ending up having to be in hospital, bringing him to hospital there for 3 weeks, steroids and on steroidals and a whole lot of other treatments. And that led into a fibromyalgia. So I was ill for about a year. And after, I suppose that was sort of the dark night of the soul. Looking back, it was my awakening. But I started to question what keeps people well. Why do people get sick? Why would somebody going through a normal event have such a huge outcome? And so I started to explore all sorts of things, but a lot of complementary therapies. I had acupuncture, I had reflexology, I saw a therapist, a lot of, following on and taking the advice as well of the medical model, which largely was rest. And then when I was expecting my second baby, Zoe, somebody mentioned Reiki to me. I'd never heard of it. And she said, you should try and find that. So there was one person in South Tipperary at that time practicing, a lovely woman called Josephine Ryan. And I attended her. And then she arrived and continued on, not really continued on with my life, went back to the hospital. And it was when much later, she was nearly 2, when another friend said, I'm going to go for this healing session. I've been given a gift. And when she came back, the change in her was such that I thought, I really must go to see what that is. And that turned out also to be Reiki. And that was in 1999. And I just basically, really early 1999. And then towards the end of 1999, I never realized you could learn it. I never, as I said, I had never heard of it initially. And I started, the beginning was beautiful. And then, of course, you go through your layers. And I did the first training in 1999. At the end of that. And
so Eileen is a Reiki master
as
well. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are 3 levels, Reiki 1, 2, and Reiki 3, which is Reiki master. And after that, I did Seichem. So Reiki is earth energy and Seichem is air, fire, and water, bringing all the elements together. And then at that point, I was still working in the hospital. I was really doing this for myself, my own growth, my own development. And I was becoming more, I suppose, awakened. And then when I did Seichem, shortly after that, I attended the foundation course of Aura-Soma. Aura-Soma is another therapy that I offer and teach. And
I'm going to ask more about that because I'm very curious. I never heard of it. I'm very, very little.
No, yes.
And
we'll come back to that. But that was actually, it's important to say that at that point, Aura-Soma the first level was taught 3 days and then 2-week gap and then 3 days. So I was happily in the hospital working at the first weekend, and I had left, which I didn't realize forever. By the second weekend, I had a crisis in childcare that came out of the blue, and I hadn't taken paternity leave because I was in management and job sharing, and I felt I wouldn't have been at work at all, and I felt very committed to it. So it was that journey between, the juggle that so many women have between work and children and home, but I took the 6 weeks off and I prayed and meditated during that time. And I really did think the clouds might open and I'd get a really strong sign. That didn't happen. But I did wake up one morning and thought, I'm just going to take a year out and see what happens. And so I did. And my phone started ringing and it never stopped. So, and I thought maybe after a year I'd be going back, but that didn't happen. So that was in 2002. And about 10 months after that, people started to ask me, would I teach them Reiki? And that began the start of the teaching aspect. Although as a midwife, particularly, there was a teaching role involved in that anyway, with mothers and in a training school with students. And then after that, I've done yoga teacher training, Yoga Nidra training, crystal therapy training. And in more recent times, my own work has emerged, as in my own healing. It's not mine. It's a modality to support people at this time and the times we're coming into. And that's called Cosmic Heart Activation.
Yes, that's such a beautiful name.
Sequence. It was a Cosmic Heart sequence, which involves, the first level is Cosmic Heart Activation, second one is Cosmic Heart Acceleration, and the third is Cosmic Heart Presence.
Okay. So your words are sitting so well with you, and I just want to process them a little bit for people who are not, because I'm very aware of them. They land well in my place, but I just want to make sure that people are aware of the meaning and what we are talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm going back when you said that when you were in the nursing part of your life, you had that blessing moment and I felt like the spiritual side was still there.
Oh, absolutely.
Now it's lost from the current medical care system.
Oh, I'm not so sure.
Are you okay?
I'm not so sure. I think there are amazing people working in the medical care system who work with their hearts, who work with great challenge because of the stretching within, resource. And I think that actually, there's sometimes there are people who feel, it has to be one way or the other. I would be much more interested in seeing, a flow of both being brought together, because we need both. If you break your leg, no amount of Reiki or positivity will, if you need a bolt put into that, or you know what I mean, or if you need an organ removed. And
I'm so happy that you make that clear, because I'm totally with that. Like I'm believing in that 100%.
Yes.
But for like everything else in life, separation kicks in, and then when you are not in the heart, you are.
But I believe that most, our birthright really is, like, why we've come here in the first place really is to awaken to that place, which is the heart, which is the place where truth and love reside. And when we come from that place, with a place of, I think what happens from many people anyway, the heart breaks along the way. And, the Leonard Cohen song, where the crack comes, the light comes in. And I think that's really where we develop compassion. And when you meet somebody who has developed compassion, whatever they're doing, they will be bringing their very best through.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Tell me a little bit about being in the heart. How you explain that to someone who never heard of it?
Okay. Well, in the West, we tend to operate from a head space, we have, in simple terms, we have a physical body, which we all know because we can see it, we can feel it, and it responds to us. And then we have what we describe as the light body, or the non-visible part of ourselves, which really is our emotions, which are our feelings, our mental body, which is our thinking, and then we have our spiritual body. And so all of us are really a very big field, although we only see part of ourselves, unless we're clairvoyant. And essentially, when science has proved this, everything on this planet is energy-based. So everything is vibrating. The table that is between us, the chair I'm sitting on, the door, the carpet. Obviously, these are vibrating at a lower level than we are. But in the natural world, in nature, the plant kingdom is the highest vibrational force of all. So that is why pharmaceutical medicines all have come originally through the plants, and why people take herbal medicine, flower tinctures. And so so this whole earth is a mass of energy that's all vibrating. So when you and I meet, we have a connection, but our field is your field, and we resonated very well from the start.
Did I not start with that?
Which was lovely. And then sometimes we meet people, and maybe the vibration isn't quite the same, or we're in circumstances, where people we might have a difficulty, or just maybe a neutral. But what happens is that so that's part of it, where we are energy fields. And so when the interaction then is either can be positive, and then we have a positive connection, which sometimes people just describe basically as a golden thread. And then when there's been an upset, a disappointment, a betrayal, anger, which we have plenty of as well on this planet at this time, be like a cobweb. So even in part of what I do is to clear out those cobwebs, to free it up. That's called a tie cutting prayer. But you're asking me about the heart space. So in the West, we have developed in the mind a lot. So we are very quick on, and our mental body is very important. It's where we've got all our thinking, our intelligence, but we also have judgment, and we can become quite judgmental. When we judge ourselves in particular, and then other people, we can start off, or we can just feel that everything has to be worked out from a a mental level, whereas we actually know that, I mean, how can you describe a sunrise? How can you describe waves rolling in on a beach? We can have a good go at it, but everybody's experience, and that becomes a more expansive spiritual experience often in nature, and that's when our hearts are touched. So it is possible, though, to come into our heart space by intention. We can ask, may I come into my heart? And there is a little prayer. And, when we talk about the word God as well, for some people, but we're talking about source, the source of all that is, the highest vibration of love. So, a little saying or intention or prayer that I would lead a group always with would be, and they can say it if they wish and not if they don't, but is, please God, put all of my awareness into my heart. Mm-hmm. I am my heart. I am my heart. I am my heart. I am my own true heart. With great respect and love, I honor my heart, my inner teacher. And then we invite the eyes to close, and that dropping down from thinking through feeling into being. And with practice, you get into that much faster. At the beginning, the mind is going in all sorts of directions, and that's okay. It's like we have to be friendly with our thoughts and not shun them away. We can be very harsh on ourselves. Our inner dialogue can be very difficult, to be with. So when then we come into that heart space, it's where truth and love reside. So it's our sense of our real sense of ourselves. And with practice, that really does come good. When we've had our hearts broken, and let's face it, most humans at some point along the way, this whole journey about compassion, suffering, unfortunately, is part of the human condition. And of course, the mental body, I don't want it, I don't like it, I don't want it to be like this, I want it to be like that. And we also we're fed this through, to a degree, social media and Hollywood, and, that life should be one joyous dream and everything work out, fall in love, have the perfect life, perfect career, the right everything, but life has a way of twists and turns. And sometimes, and when we do go through the hard, challenging aspects and what could be described as life lessons, it is very difficult. And I think, no one knows one's path except the person themselves. And a lot of the time it takes a while to get to know that. We talk about, from my perspective, we have this, people would say we're human beings, we're not human doings. And a lot of the time we're all going. But what we really are spiritual beings who are incarnated for a blink through time and space onto the earth. And we have an agreement, as it were, our contract for what we've come in to do. So from my perspective, and people don't have to believe this, but for me, I believe that we choose. It's not predestined, it's pre-chosen. So in spirit, we choose our parents, we choose our birth, where we come in the birth order, and we choose our sex. As a result of that, we come into a certain country, certain parents. We might be living in a city, we might be living in the country. We have so in the time we are born, the social side, the economy, the politics, the religion, what's going on in the world, all of that is an influence. So we come in as a soul, we choose this place because it's the perfect ground for our beginning, for this part of the soul's evolution. So of course, I meet people every day who say, or certainly every week, I wouldn't have that mother, I wouldn't have that father, I'd be an only child, I'd only have brothers, I'd only have sisters, I'd live in Australia. But, this part we have to accept. And there's a journey sometimes, because some people have very tough beginnings. And, that can be something that has to be worked through and beyond. It also made sense for me about why would somebody choose to be born into abject poverty, into terrible disease, into, all those.
What is your answer to that if someone asks?
Well, my answer is that it is very difficult, first of all, but that isn't, and a human would not choose that, but a soul will choose something that may be very difficult to come through. And so, we are in a time of awakening. Some people would describe it as that the soul has a timeline that puts alarm clocks down. Some are small and some are big, to ensure that we wake up, because the purpose of being here is to awaken. And of course, we are going through, as you probably are very aware, a very big awakening at this time.
Yes, yeah.
So on the 3D, the third dimensional level, things are in chaos, crisis, and really in a very, very difficult situation. We've got the extreme, political situations, wars, droughts, climate change.
Do you think it's happening because of us, the 3D?
Oh, I think, the 3D level is, all of this is happening because of humans.
Okay.
We're the only species who have caused destruction on the planet. Everything else lives in harmony, in its way. And wherever our footfall has come, that there's evidence everywhere of that. We are, some would say this is an experiment. I don't use that word, but I think what is happening is, I mentioned the light body. That's developing further, the non-visible part of ourselves. So we are evolving, we are awakening, and that is to awaken to the fact that we are part of the divine and we are all one. So we talk about unity consciousness.
Yes.
There is very little evidence on the 3D level of that, because we are still in separation. And it is separation from the Godhead. We have forgotten who we are, because at that point that I mentioned on the bardo, before we come in and we make those choices, we are full of love, and I will do that for humanity. I will do that for my brother, my sister, or my, but then when that sperm and egg meet and there's that explosion of light, and through Aura-Soma it's recognized through color, we come into those people that we said they're going to be our parents. We forget everything. So, we come through that journey of pregnancy, which has a strong influence as well on the being. And there's not disagreement, but there's discussion around whether the soul comes in at that point of conception, or whether the soul waits with the fetus as it develops, and then on the first in-breath, the soul comes in, and on the last out-breath, goes back again. So all babies, as they're born, all life, you come in on, and the first thing that happens is the breath. And,
Yes.
And that's that beautiful pause, which you might remember at Luke's birth, when the baby is born, and there is that moment of stillness, and that brings emotion always to me. And then the cry comes, then there's the joy. And then as one makes one's transition out from life, which is equally beautiful, but we don't see it as that way because of our human hearts. Sometimes, obviously, if there were people that we love dearly, we're very sad, obviously, heartbroken. But on the last out breath, then that brings us back into home again, really. So it is that journey of the soul. So the fifth dimension, which is that space that we are moving towards, that is achieved or accessed through the higher vibrations. So love, gratitude, compassion,
and this
forgiveness.
is what glimpse of that we get from meditating and doing the inner work and staying more in the moment. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. In the now. And of course, I mean, again, it's almost a cliche, the present is the gift because it is the now. Tomorrow will be the now when it reaches.
Exactly.
And the past has happened and it's over and can never be revisited again. But we can learn from the past, obviously.
I think we meant to.
Yes,
Is it?
and, yes, exactly. It's, and sometimes we don't want to do that learning, or it's a little difficult, but I think if we can pause sometimes and reflect, because, doing the same thing over and over, getting the same result, sometimes we have to stand back. And I also think, the biggest holding for all of us is fear. And fear creates limitation. And so that limitation then will stop us from where we need to go unless we have the strength and the courage to, Susan Jeffers' line, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I think that's part of the work that I do, because humans are incredible. Like, the human being is amazing, and the potential within humanity is extraordinary. And, we see evidence of so much courage in all around us in daily living. And I think that's another part that's important for people to know, is that destinies are different. Again, in the material world, it is almost like, you've got to get to the top of that world of, high finance, or be a rock star, or famous. That's for some people, but other people's journeys are to live not simpler lives, but it's still as complete. But it may be to attend a garden. It may be to teach small children. It may be to raise a family. It may be to work in a care home. It may be to work with addicts and dropouts, or we see dropping from the
depends
north.
What is the call?
The call, yes, and that call is actually inward. We find that call inside ourselves. We're in a time, we lived, like I grew up in a time where people, it was quite rote. You went to school, you went to secondary school. Many went to secondary school at that time. And then there was a choice for afterwards. But there was a tendency that you should know at 18 or 20 what you were going to do.
Exactly.
And then there was a whole lot of sort of comfort in permanent pensionable positions that guaranteed you. But the world has changed an awful lot, as you know now. So,
and it's in such a short period.
Very short. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now people are much more on a tapestry. They might, do something first and then move on to something else. And then that, I think the other thing is that we're never there. While we're breathing, we're growing and learning. So it's never too late. I think that's really
when you
important.
mention about the tough experiences and we don't like to be in those feelings when we suffer and all that, but I think you can't grow without those experiences.
Absolutely.
And as hard, as tough as it is in the middle of it, I think beyond that, when you pass it through, it's so, you are different. You are not the same. And I think we are not the same from one second to another.
No, absolutely. We are not. And I think that mentioning, the beginning, what I was saying earlier about, the world that we come into with all those, what we call conditioned patterns. So as a result of the world that you were born into, the country you were born into, the circumstances, some of the patterns are put upon us, as it were. So we have to shake those off. It's like a snake letting go skin. Who am I really? Who am I beneath all of that?
And we don't like to do that.
No.
That's so interesting. No. I see that in my work and I see that in myself. Yes. Like when I discover something and it's like, do I have to stop doing that? I'm not saying giving up, but I know. Because and it's a choice again, as this podcast is when you choose you, it's very intentional.
Yes.
The name was very intentional because I do believe that we make choices at every given moment.
In every nanosecond.
Exactly.
And then it's what part of us is in charge, what part is it, who am I really listening to?
Tell me a little bit more about that because I would like the listeners and the people who are watching us to get a sense of that.
Well, there's a sense, I suppose, of, we have the ego, which is that part that wants instant gratification, doesn't really want pain. Well, it feeds off pain in some ways, but, it doesn't want to really move through where our higher self, our greater knowing, that part of us that's inside there as well. That's the part that knows the wise choice. Mm-hmm. And it is sometimes the easiest way is not always the best way.
Yes.
The simple fix isn't always the answer. And I think, there's been a quote from somebody I heard recently saying, Aristotle said that excellence is not an act, it's a habit. That's the guy Ger from Body Slims. He it's a program that people do for weight loss, but it's also really about it. It has a lot of other benefits, but it is our daily habits. It's not what we do occasionally that really counts. It's the daily, how we care for ourselves and baby steps. Yeah. And if you're in a place where nothing is working out for you, if you feel, I'm not happy in relationships, I'm not happy in my work, I'm not happy with this. And then what can happen is we start blaming somebody else for our lack of happiness. And so a very big step is to draw back to ourselves and say, okay, so what are my daily routines like? How do I care for myself? And often if you're willing to look at that, there can be certain things that we're doing that aren't so helpful, like staying up too late, watching endless television or scrolling endlessly on on our iPad or our phone, thinking, she has it easier than I have, he has it easier.
Judging what you said at the beginning.
But nobody has it easy. Even the people who look like they're in bliss, and I think then it is I think another part as well is that there's sometimes a disconnect from our physical. And I think it is, how can we learn to learn to love our bodies and ourselves? We have self-love and self-acceptance is a huge challenge.
Totally. And why do you think is that?
Because, well...
And self-praise in a healthy way and in a positive way, it's almost unacceptable for some of
Well, in our tradition here in Ireland.
I noticed that, but I think it's everywhere.
Well, it was very strongly here that it was a sin to like yourself even, or love yourself, and all of, in pride and etc. So it's not about, I'm the best, and it's about really accepting ourselves as we are, loving ourselves and bringing that love and that care to ourselves in everything that we do. And then we can share that with others. So really the value of any relationship that we're in with anyone, if we're not loving ourselves, it isn't that deep.
Yes.
It's because that's as far as we can go, and we become conditional. If you do this, then I will, that's so unconditional love is something that's very rarely seen within humans, very rarely.
Yeah.
The love for those who might love a dog, a dog's love is unconditional.
Unconditional, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
So,
beautiful.
that unless it's been mistreated, a dog will love its carer owner. Yeah. So, I think it is. That's a very big thing about judgment. You're asking, we're being constant, and particularly women, constantly being fed subliminally, we're not enough unless we have a figure that looks like a certain way, our teeth are a certain way, that we dress in a certain fashion, and that is over and over. And we see this where in the younger generations, and there are amazing young people in what they're doing, but some are really fed into, a certain look and a certain way. And that's very damaging because, it really erodes our essence and makes us feel less than.
Talking about cultures and something prompted me to something what I saw today on social media. And it prompted me to a judgment. So here you go. The red line follows. But very interesting. I observed, it was about a retreat, and it was was a retreat for women. And the title was when a man feels loved. And it was the message, subliminal message was that the women's job to make their husbands or their partners to feel loved. And immediately I was like, that's completely coming from a wrong perspective. Not what is wrong and what is right, but it's like, and where I'm coming from, the culture is that it's my job as a woman to keep my men
happy.
Yes. And I look at my mom and my dad and my grandmothers, both of them, and the same. And I think it's a burden, unnecessary burden. I'm looking now, my relationship, it's so different because I'm different.
Yes.
And my partner is different. But do I feel responsible for my partner's happiness? I don't.
No.
Not anymore. Did I feel for my previous relationship? Absolutely, I did.
Yes. And that conditioning, I think, is universal for women. That conditioning of looking after, and it's not just even it's looking after men, but it's also looking after everyone.
And after children,
everyone,
totally.
and after children.
And after elderly.
And yet, I suppose it is to find that place of, balance, because females are 2/3 female and 1/3 male. Men are 2/3 male and 1/3 female. And it's that feminine that's arising, actually. That feminine, it's not a woman, it's the divine feminine. So it's capacity to hold space, to nurture. And I think that nurturing, that's what we have to come back to learn that again. And it's not, I think sometimes the great values that we know are to be true, they don't come in the material. But we're so busy on this spiral of having to do this, having to do that. I think as well, if we could bring more meditation, more yoga, more mindfulness, more stillness into the curriculum, not just, and there's great effort to do that, and there are amazing teachers, but it tends to fade out after primary level. I think it's like some people would say there's a lot of art and creativity in the curriculum up to a certain age, and then afterwards you start to have to make choices, and that's hard because humans are creative by their very nature, and that's beyond even
and
art,
you
music,
can't
and dance.
be creative when you're under pressure.
No.
So funny.
Yes, because that's more your right brain that needs to be allowed to open. Yeah. And yes, so it is interesting, all of that.
Okay, so let's move towards your work, if I can say that. If you have a work, I think you are more like, like you are myself. I don't have a work, I have a meaning. So,
so it's...
When people are reaching out to you, when? So when...
Why?
Yeah, or why? So when in their journey?
Yes,
exactly.
Okay. Well, I was going to like that word, everyone and everywhere, but basically I would see people from babies to people who are in very old age. A lot of my practice would be maybe people reaching across. So one would be people reaching a crossroads, having to make a decision, or something has been put upon them. So it could be sometimes a crisis that will bring somebody, like it could be a bereavement, that could be the loss of a job, a relationship, a death. It could be fertility issues. It could be loss through that. It could be sometimes people come just wanting to know, is there more to my life than this? Sometimes people bring their children. The children might be not sleeping. They might have some behavioral issues. And often what can happen is you work with the child first, and then one of the parents tends to come. Okay. And I see it often that the child is bringing the parent. You know, and when you work in families, of course, it's like that ripple goes out even further. So yeah, it's very varied. I think as well, it's probably corresponds with when people start to really wake up to who they are. You know, is there more to life? And so there would have been sometimes people who'd come through their 20s into their early 30s, and then there is around that stage, but all the way through. And then so that would be people coming to have a one-to-one treatment, and then others would approach because they want to learn something or, you know, grow in through that way. I teach a gentle yoga class once a week, so some people come through that. I lead a monthly meditation to welcome the month, which is through Zoom. That's about an hour and a half, usually on the 1st or as close to the 1st as possible. So quite a number of people come to that directly, or they take the recording. I also lead a Peace to All Beings, which is an Aura-Soma meditation at 12 midday every Thursday. That's a free offering, and people can join in on Zoom, and that's also recorded. And that meditation is being led in every country, 90 countries, the Aura-Soma is in the world at the same time, which is very beautiful for peace. And then I teach the 3 levels of Reiki. I teach Seichem. I teach Divine Essence Crystal Healing, which is a practitioner training for crystals, and then my own work, the Cosmic Heart Sequence. So it's a very varied week, and very joyous, and because no 2 people are the same, no 2 groups come together the same. And even though I would maybe on my webpage put it out what I'm doing, it looks like I'm gathering the groups, but actually Spirit brings the groups together. And I'm always amazed and fascinated by, you know, the interconnection between people. And these are people who have never met often before, and then they have so much in common on so many levels. So it's, and the biggest part of the greatest joy for me is to see people really growing and moving on. And many now have their own practices and are teaching as well. So that's fabulous. You know.
How your new self integrated with the old healer, like the nurse. So your new teachings, your new part of, like, new understanding of what healing means and how healing happens, when healing happens, how did integrate into?
I think it's the other way around, actually. Okay. I think it was my the older knowing just came in its right time. And I think there was a need for maturity, literally in every way. You know, I think it was really at my late 30s that really started. But I come from a lineage of, I suppose, of healers. You know, my parents they were GPs. My grandmother was a nurse, but she had really had healing hands. And I recognize, I was called after her, I recognize a lot of what, you know, people used to come to her for all sorts of things. And sometimes it was just to be in her presence. So I think, you know, it's like what Vicky Wall said about Aura-Soma, it's the old wine in new bottles. I think that we're bringing our wisdoms from a deeper past to back now for this time.
Okay, that's so beautiful.
Because, well, thank you. We are in critical change, you know, there's no doubt about that.
I really want to say thank you for embracing the gift, because that's it. I think you are such a gift to the world.
Thank you very much, Samandra.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing that. Thank you for being open to the divine.
Thank you.
Another question was, you do Reiki?
Yes.
Okay, what is Reiki?
Well, in its translation, it's a Japanese word, rei and ki, 2 words. Ki, like life force energy, so universal life force energy. So basically, everything that is alive has life force moving through it. So if you look at 2 plants, one is alive and one is dead, there's life force moving through the living plant. There isn't in the other. So I see Reiki as one's birthright. I think everybody should be taught it or offered
And thank you. Hold on to your, because I want to make sure we had another Reiki master in the studio. And that's why I said I wanted to hear your version, because I think we are not 2 persons talking exactly the same thing, and it's your. Thank you for putting that.
So it is. That's what it translates as, and essentially its origin is unknown, but it's likely to have come from the East. Yes. Well, I mean, there are people who say it came from. I'm sure you've heard Yusui, who was some people would say he was a Christian monk. It's more likely he was Buddhist, based on that he was Japanese, but he did a quest. Somebody asked, why do some people have healing capacities and others don't? So he went to find out about that, and he went to certain holy places, and he got sutras back from India, etc., etc. And he climbed onto a sacred mountain near Kyoto in Japan, and at that mountain, he did a 21-day fast, and he gathered stones. He had 21 stones, so each day he threw away the stone, and on the last day he was very disappointed because nothing had happened. And as he was rolling his sleeping mat, he saw a cloud. This is all verbally passed down. He saw a cloud coming towards him, and he was initially a little bit frightened. And then he thought, maybe this is what I'm waiting for. So the cloud struck him on his third eye, and he was taken on a journey, and he saw all those symbols that he had read about and understood them, and he was enlightened in that moment. So he woke up after what felt like a sleep, and he had a lot of energy. He ran down the mountain, which was unusual to have that energy after 21 days, and he called to an inn, and the innkeeper noticed that he asked for a large meal, which again, people with something usually have something light, and he shared with him what had happened, and the innkeeper recognized straight away that this was something unusual, and he asked, would he look at his ill daughter who had a dental abscess? And it is said he placed his hands and cured her. And he went back to the holy man, who said, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to work and bring people back, help them. So he went to the slums and he healed people. He got people jobs. He arranged marriages, and that all continued on for a while. But then he recognized that the same people were coming back. And he said to one man one day, I thought we had you sorted a while ago. And the man said, yeah, but it's easier to come back here. So he realized he hadn't taught responsibility. And so then he went away and kind of guided through that. And then Sahi was another man who had a naval experience, who was retired, and he joined him, and they moved from town to town. And Sahi was very impressed by Yusui's integrity. He used to place a lit flame in the center and then do his teachings. And at that time, then he initiated people over long periods of time. And then the oral story goes that there was a widow called Mrs. Takata, who was Japanese in origin but lived in Hawaii, and she became ill, and she went to Japan for her treatment and saw a doctor, and she was scheduled to have surgery. And then her late husband came in a dream, and he said to her, there's another way. So she went back to the surgeon, and the surgeon said, I don't know any other way, but there's a Reiki clinic down the road. And so she went, and apparently she was cured over 6 months, and she was initiated into the first 2 levels of Reiki. And then the Second World War came. She'd gone back to Hawaii, and then she was initiated into Reiki Master later, not knowing whether that was because she was perceived as a foreigner or whether she was a woman. But so, I mean, obviously it wasn't just them. I'm sure there was plenty of Reiki elsewhere.
Yes.
But the story with her was that then she moved to California and she initiated 22 Reiki Masters before her passing. She hadn't children, but she had 2 grandnieces, or she had 2 grandnieces. And when she passed, because she taught in an oral tradition, she didn't allow questions or notes. So these 22 sat around a table, and humans being humans, there was disagreement and so there were certain schisms, and there are certain lineages, and one could get very caught into that. But really, Reiki is love. And what happens is when one is initiated into that, a channel is opened. It's almost like, everybody has natural healing abilities. Somebody falls down, you pick them up, you give them a hug, you kiss it better like a child, you put the Band-Aid on, you make the cup of tea. We do all that. Is all a healing. Because healing is about coming back to wholeness. So the difference between Reiki and the hug is that in that initiation, it's like a channel. If you could imagine a channel that is from source, that has no interference, is coming down, comes through you and out from you, usually through your hands. So when somebody actually is giving a healing, it's not them. So if you were having an off day, or if you were worried about something, that worry isn't going to come through to your client. You'd park it any, obviously, ways of managing that. Yeah. But so it's not you actually giving it to the person. It is the person taking it through you from source. And they are activating their own healing.
Yes.
So we do not do the healing. Yeah. The person does the healing. And actually that word healing is overused. I mean, so what it is coming back to wholeness. And there are many ways, because we are complex, but in the end of the day, love is the answer to everything.
Yeah. I call it facilitating healing more than healing.
Yeah, exactly.
You create a space and you the support.
And then, what emerges from that is, the person starts to really come back to themselves. And then they take the responsibility to care for themselves. And sometimes it's baby steps, but they grow. It's like, how do you walk how do you run a marathon? Step by step, or climb the mountain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
What is Aura-Soma?
Aura-Soma is a non-intrusive, self-selective soul therapy. So essentially, you are the colours you choose, and they reflect your being's needs. So with Aura-Soma, the person...
We all have an aura, yeah?
Aura, it's the light body.
The light body, okay.
So what Aura-Soma is essentially about recognising yourself through the language of colour and number. So the last time, colour and number are languages, and the last time there were the mystery schools in the Nile, were the last time the colour was taught as a language. So it's quite a way back. So it's about all of the past and all of the present future coming together through the 3 kingdoms. So the main part of Aura-Soma is called equilibrium bottles, and then the supports are pomandras, quintessences, archangeloids, colour essences. And so the bottles, there are 123 bottles, and they look like jewels. Some of them have the same color on the top and the bottom, and others have a change from the top and the bottom. So they're 2 colors. And you look at when you come for a consultation, you approach and you might do a little centering first and use a pomandra, which is a protection to the aura. And then the person is invited to make choices. So they choose what calls them most. So it goes beyond like and dislike. So it's what's calling me. Sometimes people say, what would you like? If you were going to a desert island, what one of those would you take with you? So you go beyond, I like blue and I don't like red, to what calls me. Yeah. So we do that. And you do that, and then when the first bottle has been chosen, you look again, and if that bottle wasn't there, what would you choose? And you do that for a total of 4 bottles. So the first bottle is my mission and purpose. Who am I? Where have I come from? What are my influences? And what have I come in here to do?
So it's a meaning.
Oh, yes, on every level.
Yeah.
Then the second bottle are the gifts and talents that you have asked for and been given. But with every gift, there's wrapping. So that aspect is the hard stuff, what we've the life journey, the lessons, the challenges that have brought a gift ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And then those two bottles together are the combined a past, which would include previous incarnations, if one is open to believing that we've been here as a soul before, not as an essence. There's only one you ever,
totally.
And then we cross what's called the imaginary line of time into the third bottle, which is what's going on currently, what's going on in the here and now. And that bottle will relate in a big way to the first bottle, and we're seeing how this person is getting on with their mission and purpose in relation to the integration of the gift.
Okay.
And the fourth bottle is an aspect of the future that we are drawing towards ourselves, but we can have that now if we allow ourselves. So then these bottles contain oil and water that's been very beautifully collected and prepared, and it goes through a very big process.
Yeah.
And to that, the liquid and solid part of herbs are added, plus crystals that are crushed in a very special way. So all the kingdoms are together in the one bottle. And then what you have to do then is to apply it to your body. Because and often people will look at Aura-Soma and say, it's so beautiful, I couldn't put it on my skin, or I don't want to waste it. But actually that's we deny ourselves then. So this is you giving back to yourself, because the colours you choose are the colours you are working out of. So when you apply it to the body, it enters through the skin, to the lymphatics, to the bloodstream, into then, so it works through the physical, emotional, mental and spiritual bodies, a holistic way of giving back to ourselves. So it works on all levels. And then the number of the bottle is relevant, and the combined numbers of the bottle, and that gives another whole set of information, but also remembrance. Aura-Soma is about remembering.
Yes.
So and remembering means gathering ourselves together again, because in our journey, our soul, there's been fragmentation along the way as well. So it was brought to the world by Vicky Wall, who she was an amazing woman who was actually clinically blind in later life, in poor health, when this gift came.
Wow.
And Mike Booth is the principal now, and he met her along, and he spent he was her constant companion and learned from her through the last 7 years of her life. And then he has taken it since the early 90s, and she birthed it for the world, and he has delivered it to the world, and works tirelessly, in an amazing way. It's a beautiful community, and also Aura-Soma it's relevant to everyone at all times, very supportive.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
And the crystals, where are
crystals? Well, the crystals, as we know, crystals are a gift from the earth. They've been here for millions, some of them millions of years. They contain incredible capacity towards healing and power, and there are many. I mean, a lot of people. Everything again has a consciousness. The stones on the beach have consciousnesses. You have, there's messages from everything.
Tell me about that. Yeah. I have tons of them at home, and my partner said, "What are we going to do with them?" I said, "Don't throw them, please. Yeah. They are my stones."
Yeah, no, they are important. And actually, in the cosmic heart, we start with a stone before we move to the crystals. Stones that have been collected. I have a strong affinity. Well, I love all beach and sea, but I particularly love Ardmore in County Waterford, and also parts of Clare. Yeah. So but yes.
For me, I don't know why actually. I didn't even look in why. I know they're calling me, the stones, all the time. If I'm on the mountains.
And on the mountains, yes.
Or whatever. If I have stones around me, I'm so happy. Yeah. I can't, I can feel the joy.
Yes, and we have lots of, and there are crystals, in our mountains as well. And
Lucas got me from Seven Sisters Mountains. They went with the school when he was in a trip, and he got me a crystal from the mountain, and still have that.
Yeah. So I teach I was working intuitively for years with crystals, but when I met Jacinta Murray, who brought through the Divine Essence Crystal Healing System, I really resonated with that. So I did the training with her and then the teacher training. And I've just completed actually 3 days. And it's a great joy. It's beautiful. And it's a kind of because when you work with them, they're very sensitive, so they tune in as well, and you find and they have their own vibration. But if people aren't respectful to them, they disappear literally. And people will say that to you. I used to, and sometimes then even when people are very respectful, if they've done their work with you, they will disappear. So they can be there. People love them because obviously they can see them, they can feel them, and then when you can work with them, on their own, or you can work with them with other modalities as well. But something like I'm sure you've heard of rose quartz. Rose quartz is such a there's lots of quartz, but it's a very beautiful one for the heart and very very lovely one when people are feeling sad or grief. But it also supports in that feeling of love and joy. Then when people are maybe wanting to support more abundance in their life, even taking a small citrine and putting that into your wallet or your purse, it works.
I showed you before that I had them. I heard that from very interesting, a non-business mentor.
Yes, there you go.
And yes, that was very beautiful. Yes. So I'm learning.
Yeah, they have lots of purposes, and they also help us in our ascension process as well, opening up again through meditation and through the higher mind functions.
I think it's very good tool to ground ourselves.
Yes, some of them are,
access that connection to the earth.
Yes.
And because we are so much in.
Yeah. And of course, the earth is our mother. Gaia is our, all life force is sustained by the earth. And that's the other very important thing that humanity's had a disconnect from. We are the earth. We're part of her. Mm-hmm. And, she will evolve and will continue to evolve. She's going through a massive evolution as well at this time.
Okay.
But she will do it regardless. Like humans, it's described sometimes we're like ants on her surface, So the big challenge is whether we will take the offering to awaken. And I believe that is really possible despite everything that is happening. I think that that unity consciousness, once a critical mass of people are actually living from their hearts, from a space of truth, love and compassion. And I think also a very big part of this then is for the journey of forgiveness, which is massive and of course very hard when there's been very deep hurt, as we can see.
And it's I think the forgiveness, we are perceiving forgiveness like something external to us. And
absolutely.
To me, it's more healing happening when it's towards ourselves.
Yes.
And then
that's where it starts.
Are able to, exactly.
Yeah, that's where it starts,
It would be beautiful to be able to actually start there.
Yeah,
and even
absolutely.
If 10 people are listening to this episode and they can actually relate to that and start practicing forgiveness towards themselves.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful start, or it's actually another step.
Yeah, absolutely. And until that step is taken, there will be none anywhere else, And I think we have to separate who has hurt us from the action. And that can take time, and it may need support from somebody outside you as well to help with that. But once we can separate that, because wrong action is never right. But everybody is working to the best of their capacity with where they are in that point in time. And, often somebody who's hurt us deeply, they've moved on. And we're carrying this as an enormous weight on our shoulders. And it's preventing us from moving forward. So in a way, it is the choice of whether we're going to continue carrying that burden and becoming bitter, because that's what happens. We become bitter, we become angry, and all of that is blocked pain.
Thank you so much for prompting that, because that's the next question. So, and the last, I think, where do you see the physical pain or illness in this? I think
we see it
the next, what you were saying there.
Any pain is saying something. We see it in the heart, and heart conditions, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart attacks, or we call it angina. We see it in tummy issues,
And there are so many
ulceration,
lately.
bowel,
it's so much of them coming up.
There is, yes. And of course, we have the food chain. Some aspects of that can contribute. But, by and large, and then when people say, well, it's in my line, like we all had it. Rheumatoid arthritis is one where people with,
and cholesterol is so much like,
yes, that they'll say, well, it was my father, my grandfather. Then it's the pattern is in the line. But you might be the one who's going to break that, change that, and there is much more. We can say, yes, this is in the physical. It takes a long time to get to the physical as well. All disease, lack of ease, starts in the finer bodies or the tune. So if we are thinking negatively, if we are feeling negatively, if we're not it will work its way ultimately into a physical manifestation. That's proven as well. So, so we have to work our way back. And I think, again, it's not with harshness. It's like, why somebody has something, it's even when people are battling, really battling with low mood or depression, anxiety, we have to reach that with compassion, but also act.
Yes.
And it's the steps that we take to act. And sometimes it's a multidisciplinary approach. And, it takes time to come to that situation. We didn't get to it overnight, usually. So it takes time.
Were there situations where you felt like you scared someone and didn't come because it was too much for that person to perceive that?
No, I don't think so.
I wouldn't
say that, but I think that sometimes what can happen sometimes is, very occasionally I've had people who've come, maybe had 1 or 2 sessions and said, that's grand and it's great. But I would have a letter a few years later, or they may come back a few years later and say, that was a turning point for me. I didn't know it at the time. And that's lovely. But that's not, I'm not attached to that. That's my work. That's my mission. That's my service, actually, is my service to support people like that. And then sometimes people will do so much. They may come and do a couple of trainings, or they may come and, have a couple of sessions, and then they'll integrate it.
Yes.
And then other times it may come that somebody might benefit by, some physical therapy after the energetics. So the practice of, say, osteopathy, amatsu, craniosacral therapy, that can be very useful. So I would refer people on to other practitioners. And obviously as well, if somebody needs to see somebody in the medical model, that goes without saying that would be advised too. Yeah. And then sometimes, occasionally, people might need to go for counselling, that sort of therapy. But more often than not, I would see people who've actually come through that and done a lot of talk therapy maybe, and need to have, to settle.
Other modalities too.
But there is, and also occasionally, and it's important to say, sometimes memory might come back for people, and then they might need to talk about that. So, it's not, there isn't a universal prescription as such. Everything is tailored to the individual because everybody is unique.
Yes.
And everybody's, every person is so valuable.
Thank you so much for the beautiful sharing.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We'll put your website on the description, and if people want to reach out,
they can. To meet them.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
And before we finish, do you have a question for me?
I have a question for you. What did you find? What part of yourself did you find when you came to Ireland? Because I know you weren't born here.
Yes.
What part of your soul did you connect with?
Recently, I discovered that Ireland chose me.
Okay.
Because I'm writing my book. And when I say writing my book is my life story. And I just discovered that Ireland chose me. I didn't know where I'm coming. I knew very, very little about Ireland altogether. And I just Googled a little bit about Clonmel. I knew I'm coming to Clonmel. Yes. So I discovered a completely new me. That's
who you found here.
Yeah,
that part
exactly.
Of you, yeah, very beautiful.
Yeah. So, and very interesting question prompts me to something what I knew. I observed again about my journey that I had to forget what I knew. And I feel shivers in my body, so that's the message. So yes, I had to forget what I knew about myself and start from the scratch. I caught up very fast with the awareness and all that, but I had physically, because I didn't know language, it was like being born again.
So it's like a rebirth. Yeah, you had a spiritual rebirth. Yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. That's such a beautiful question. And thank you again for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I am sure that we will meet again.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.